So with this week's episode of Garo Vanishing Line, I feel like we got a lot of information on Luke as a character for not actually seeing a whole lot with him within this episode. I feel like a lot of it was done through just visuals in the backgrounds and things like that, but Luke has been a character I've been really looking forward to seeing more of ever since we saw his epic kind of introduction with Sword fighting that horror who was kind of running away, and he had amazing sniping abilities. He was clearly a really good gunsman. Like, he's insanely good with guns. And what I thought was the most interesting thing with this episode is how he actually has a sword in the background. It's this kind of like big, kind of heavy sword, something that you would actually think our main character's sword would use. But what's interesting is as the episode kind of progresses and you see a bit of his backstory with his father, it seemed like his father was a Makai Knight and he was trying to train his son Luke to be one of those. Just throughout the episode, the fact that he was being trained with a sword and obviously was struggling with it, it just feels like his body wasn't built to have swordplay. It was more built for range and kind of combat with guns and things like that. And I think the whole idea of this backstory was to showcase that he essentially failed what his father wanted him to do, and essentially he picked up a different skill set, something that matched his own body, but that's ultimately why he never became someone like Sword. And I feel like part of the reason he has a sort of, not a great fondness of Sword as a character is he obviously doesn't hate him. He does work with him, but he doesn't agree with his ideals of getting to know people and helping people. He just wants to save people, not get involved with them, whereas Sword does. And I think part of the reason he has such a kind of distaste for Sword as a character is because Sword is someone that he couldn't be. That his father tried to train him to be someone like Sword, but ultimately he never got to be that. He had to become something else. And I feel like that's going to play a factor as the show goes on. We're going to see more of that, and that kind of hatred is going to brew. And it's not really a hatred, but this kind of discomfort that he has around him. And I think that's important because the fact that he keeps the sword around, we understand that his father was training him with it, but ultimately we know he doesn't use that as a weapon. Obviously, he wasn't skilled enough to be someone like Sword. Sword is his own person. He's a very macho man. He's hand-to-hand combat. He uses a giant sword. He is a Makai Knight. Luke himself, I believe, is a Makai Alchemist, and I feel like he feels kind of ashamed, and I think that's going to play a factor as the show goes on. But I thought they did a really good job at kind of showcasing a lot of Luke, a bit of stuff in the background, a bit of stuff in the foreground. But I feel like they did a really good job at fleshing out Luke's character for not actually having him say too much within this episode. And I also just love how Sword is literally crashing and bumming in this Chinese restaurant, and the way that they don't kick him out is because he like cooks their food every morning. And I just love how the owner of this restaurant seems to be a Makai Alchemist or a retired one himself. I just thought it was just hilarious. It's such a Sword thing to do, to just crash and bum out at a restaurant where there's pretty waitresses and things like that. And then even Sophie seems like she's getting a job there, but is way better than Sword. I just really enjoy the three's kind of relationships. And like, I love how the episode ends where Sword says, if you're ever going to return a favor, return it to Sophie, because the only reason that I could find you was because of the information that she gave me. And I just like that. I mean, she's such a fun character. She's this very contrasting personality to Sword as a character, but they just kind of connect so well. And I really hope that she gets a lot of time to kind of flesh out far past just her initial personality, because I love her personality, but I'd love to see her grow a lot, similar to just how we got to see a bit more with Luke and things like that. And I'm going to be interested to see how the entire relationship and cast dynamic is going to go going forward. But once again, the horror in this week's episode was really interesting. Like a movie theater that went haunted that pretty much throws you back into the past where you essentially can't get away. I thought that was interesting. Like, they're doing a really good job this season at making very unique horrors, either with the designs or just with what they do ultimately. And that's pretty interesting. Like, I really enjoy this, and I love that OST track that was playing when Luke was essentially fighting the horror in the movie, where it had this really good piano track, and then it would cut to some guitar riffs. It just was the best track for that scene, and it just had me smiling watching. But I really enjoy Garo Vanishing Line. Like, it's not this, like, critically, like, super deep and complex series, but there is a lot to really like about it, and they're doing enough of these characters to make them start feeling fleshed out, far past just being a trope. And I'm enjoying it a lot. But let me know your thoughts. What do you think of this week's episode and the return of Luke? And how did you enjoy the horror being a movie theater? Because that's pretty interesting in my mind. But let me know your thoughts. And before I leave, smack that like button to show your support. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.